it's Jessica here. My topic for my research paper and for my literature review was diversity, equity, and inclusion regarding people with disabilities. Some of my subtopics included the Americans with Disabilities Act and how people could follow those laws, or that law specifically in America, reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, and then types of assistive technology as well. So starting off with the general definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. According to Crockett in 2024 or 5, I believe, I don't remember exactly which, the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a social movement that allows people with disabilities to be able to get access to things like jobs in government buildings and other public buildings as well. This word doesn't involve just people who are blind like myself. This involves anybody with a disability, so people with autism, people who have mental disabilities, that type of thing. A lot of people say that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a wide spectrum, and yes, it is. But for me, when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think about people who have disabilities, who are like myself, who have to do things in different ways. So moving on to the Americans with Disabilities Act. In 2008, it was amended along with the Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act. In 2008 was also the 30th anniversary, so that was also when it was, there were changes made as well. When people think about the Americans with Disabilities Act, they think about how some people are protected and some people aren't. Well, from my research, I found that everybody who has a disability, no matter what type of disability it is, they are equally protected. So that could be somebody that's blind, somebody that's autistic. Somebody that's autistic is just as equally protected by this law as somebody who is completely blind like myself. And somebody who's autistic is allowed to have a job just like somebody like myself who is completely blind. Regarding reasonable accommodations, there are different types, like accessible Word documents for myself, where people like me who are blind can read Word documents using screen reading technology, which I'll get to later. And they're able to do it and have all their information in front of them, just like their sighted coworkers. Another part of reasonable accommodations is remote work arrangements. So if somebody is unable to drive, like somebody who's autistic or somebody who's blind like myself, they can talk to their employer about getting a remote work arrangement, which means they're able to do the same work as their sighted colleagues, but they don't have to worry about the transportation barrier, which for me myself is a lot of what I've been thinking about since I am completely blind and since I am graduating soon with my degree. Job-wise, it does help a lot when I don't have to think about the transportation barrier, especially considering how expensive things are these days. And a final part of reasonable accommodations is flexible work schedules. So if somebody has a medical disability on top of being autistic or being blind, and they need to request only working 3 or 4 days instead of working 5 days, that is a reasonable accommodations. I know a lot of companies are allowing people to work 3 or 4 days. Some companies have moved completely to that. Some companies are moved where some days it's remote, some days it's hybrid, or some days it's remote, some days it's in the office. And as a person, or as people with disabilities, people who have disabilities can request to be able to work half remote, half in the office, or if they can't handle a hybrid work schedule, they can say, hey, can I work 2 days in the office, 2 days remote because of this certain medical disability, whatever it is. Regarding types of assistive technology, this was probably my favorite part of my research, just because as being a person who is completely blind, there are so many assistive technology tools that I use myself every single day. VoiceOver on my iPhone being one of them. I have the speech off on it right now for recording this video, because VoiceOver talks a lot, and I didn't want this video to be interrupted by that. So there is screen readers, which, for example, it's VoiceOver, which was made by Apple in 2005, which I use a lot myself. Apple has made their accessibility tools so accessible, from VoiceOver in 2005 for people like myself to now allowing people who have the Apple AirPods to be able to use them as hearing aids just recently, which I thought was super cool. And Apple has just been always a company that I have looked up to for such assistive technology, because they have just included everybody at forefront of accessibility, not just their consumers, but also their employees at the workplace as well. Other types of assistive technology include audio description, where TV shows are described to where people who are blind, like myself, are able to understand visually what's going on the screen. So, for example, I'm watching The Chosen right now, and when the actors are not talking, there's a audio track that cuts in that says Jesus is walking down the street, or they're going into a house, or something of that nature. And that gives me, as a blind person, the context that says, hey, I can still be a part of this, even though I have to experience it a different way. Another type of assistive technology, which I thought was super cool when I discovered this, was an app for people who aren't able to talk or have difficulty writing. It's an app where they can speak their words to communicate to their coworkers what they're trying to say, and the device or the app will display for them what is on the screen, which I thought was super cool. So to sum this all up, assistive technology, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and reasonable accommodations are all things that need to have research done on them, because it's essential to helping people like myself or other people with disabilities be able to have access to the workplace and be able to have a job. Also, regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, a lot of companies want to implement this law in the workplace, but there is an amount of training that goes into it, specific training that goes into it. And I think if companies were just to take a step back and implement all this training to think about the reasonable accommodations, think about the assistive technology, think about the Americans with Disabilities Act and the other laws, I think the workplace would be a really good place for people with disabilities. Also, I think that society doesn't need to look at someone who applies for a job just because of their disabilities. They need to give them a chance. Because if they give us a chance and they allow us to show them what we're capable of, even though in my case we might have to use a screen reader or a braille display or something of that nature. Backtracking, a braille display is a device that I can hook up to my iPad, my computer, my phone, and I can type and read what is on the screens of my devices, which makes doing things like writing papers a lot faster. So yeah, I think as far as suggestions, I think if people were to implement the training for the Americans with Disabilities Act to be able to follow it, would think about the assistive technology and how that would help people with disabilities be able to do their jobs, and think about the reasonable accommodations and how that would make a person with a disability be able to do their jobs more efficiently, I think people would have a super big impact on the workplace, not just with disabilities, but also sighted people, because they're showing people with disabilities, hey, like, we know that you have challenges, but we're willing to overlook that and we're willing to give you a chance. So that is all for my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day.